Hello there. My name is Elio Tawanda Oninyika and I'm from the Chartered Accountants Academy. And welcome to this lecture session where we are going to discuss qualitative evaluation in decision making. So the purpose of this discussion is that we've noticed that our CT examinations as well as our ITC examinations are now also leaning more towards students being able to qualitatively evaluate or to raise qualitative consideration in decision making. Traditionally, you'd find as an example, let's say you want to evaluate a decision whether or not to invest in new equipment. Most of the time, then you'd use tools such as the NPV analysis or the project payback period, which are all quantitative models of decision making. But now the question is, you would find that over and above the quantitative analysis, students are then also expected to provide other factors to consider or perform a qualitative evaluation as part of that decision-making process. So the purpose of this lecture is then to give you a framework and a thought process that you can use when you're doing this qualitative evaluation. And I would also want to encourage you that as you are doing your practice questions, please do take time to answer those parts of the required that expect you to do this qualitative evaluation. So, number one, I'm going to first of all reference to our competence framework. So within the competence framework, what exactly is expected of us when we are answering questions? So a student will expect to be able to identify and evaluate the significance of qualitative factors that impact a decision. So the most important aspect here is we are making a decision. We've done the quantitative evaluation. The question is, what other factors should then be considered? And this can be done within the context of short-term and long-term implications associated with the proposed business decision. So I think if we take this course of action, what are the short and long-term implications as part of the qualitative evaluation? And also being able to identify any opportunities and risks arising from the proposed decision. So here you're now looking beyond the numbers. Opportunities and risks related to operational, strategic, financial, legal, and possibly environmental opportunities and risks. So in this lecture, we're going to discuss all those things. How then do you do the analysis? We also, again, within the ICAS competence framework, it expects you to be able to identify consistency of the proposed decision with reference to an entity's strategic objectives and plans. So as an organization, when we make this decision, is it in line with our strategic objectives and plans? And then also being able to recommend courses of action. So I believe quantitatively, most of you are fairly comfortable doing the quantitative analysis. You've played around with the numbers. You're saying, okay, this is a project which is giving us a positive NPV. Let's pursue it. But hold on. As part of your recommendations, you need to also look at qualitative factors. So having said this, the question is, so what is the difference between qualitative evaluation versus quantitative evaluation? So I'll start off with the quantitative. So I find this is analysis based on the dollar amount impact of the decision to be made. So normally quantitative evaluation, that is the way we are playing around with the numbers. So you identify a model that you can use to play around with the numbers. Let's say it's a valuation question that you are doing, and you've been asked to evaluate whether the shareholder should accept the rights issue price. So maybe you then do a calculation to value the equity of the company. That's a quantitative analysis. Then you come up with a dollar amount, which you then compare to what has been proposed. Or you perform an NPV calculation. You are going to come up with a dollar amount of a net present value. Quantitative evaluation. But qualitative now looks at those factors that affect a decision but cannot be measured in dollar amounts. So I think this, even though I can't put a dollar amount to it, it is very critical to the decision that I'm going to be made. So it could be, examples could include impact of the decision on the entity's reputation, on the brand strength of the business, on employee morale. So all these things, I'm looking at them within the context of the decision that I'm making. So an example could be, I'm looking to expand or to invest in a project in Mozambique. I can do the project quantitative evaluation and it appears that I'm going to make money. But other qualitative evaluations could be, do we have knowledge of the Mozambican market or economy? Are we aware of the laws and regulations that are operating in Mozambique? Are we able to have access to the right skilled labor to be able to start operations in Mozambique? So all those now become your qualitative aspects in your evaluation. So now, from an examination perspective, what nature of questions are you then expected to apply these qualitative evaluation skills? So if a question asks you, for example, to discuss the key matters that the movie committee should consider in evaluating whether they should invest in Ezempilo based on Noni's proposed transaction restructuring. So if you look at this question, I need to look at this. I want to discuss the key matters we should consider. So my consideration should be both quantitative and qualitative. So normally this requires, maybe the first part you've been asked to do a calculation etc, quantitative evaluation. As a follow-up, we are then asked to say, discuss key matters that should also be considered. Now we are looking at those qualitative factors, looking at this proposed transaction. Or you may be asked, describe the key factors DMG needs to consider in pursuing the supply arrangement with YAPD. So this question is, just looking at it itself, the factors that I'm going to consider, they need to be both quantitative and qualitative. Unless I've already covered quantitative factors maybe in a preceding required. But here the primary will be, what are now the other qualitative issues I should be able to look at. Then another required is to describe the key considerations supported by calculations. DMG should take into account in determining an appropriate selling price per miniature bottle. So the calculations are going to allow me maybe to come up with a selling price. But once I've got a number of the selling price, I'm then going to ask myself, okay, I've determined the dollar amount of the selling price, but what else should I consider as far as the selling price is concerned? An example could be, okay, the contract that I'm looking at, is it a once-off arrangement or is it going to be an ongoing or recurring type of contract? It's an important qualitative consideration. And as part of the selling price, am I already selling similar product or the same product to the rest of the market? So what does it mean to this selling price I've determined for this specific contract? We are now looking at those qualitative factors. Okay, so these are the type of questions, and if you do your analysis, especially of your management, accounting, and finance question, you're going to realize that the bias is now more on these discursive type of questions, which expect you to do this qualitative analysis in decision making. So the next biggest question is, how do I do this qualitative analysis? So how to answer the question? So what is our expectation as examiners when it comes to these types of questions? So the key point here is, as students, we expect you to look beyond the numbers. And this coming from the fact that traditionally as accountants, we've always been known to be good with numbers. But our downfall or our drawback or what people think about us, they think we're just number crunchers, but who lack strategic thinking. And that strategic thinking is arising from us at times ignoring qualitative factors in decision-making processes, which is why we are now starting to incorporate a greater deal of these types of questions in your examinations and in our teaching. So now, how do I come up with these qualitative factors? You then think of any risks and opportunities arising from the decision. So what is the risk? A risk, normally, to put it bluntly, could be, what can go wrong? If I take this course of action, what can go wrong qualitatively? If I take this option, what are the opportunities that may arise? So within an exam setting, we are now looking at these risks and opportunities within the context of the decision that needs to be made. Should we invest in this new project? Should we pay out a dividend? Quantitatively, maybe we've said we've got the money, etc. But what are other qualitative factors we need to consider? You've been asked to determine the minimum offer price that should be accepted by the selling shareholders. We have done the calculations. So qualitatively, what else should be considered by these shareholders? What are the risks? What are the opportunities? So to break down this further, I've come up with this model that you can use to identify relevant factors to consider in decision making. The first broad area I've identified is operational consideration. So here I'm looking at a decision within the context of an entity or organization. If we make this decision, what is its impact on our operations? And impact, I'm looking at both risks and opportunities. So internally, what risks does it pose to our existing customers? What risks does it pose to our, or what opportunities does it create to our existing customers where relevant? Employees, how will this decision impact on our employees? Are we going to need to have our employees, some of our employees retrenched? Or are we going to require employees to work overtime? What impact, therefore, is it going to result on our employees? We are looking to invest in a new state-of-the-art equipment. Impact on employees. Do our employees possess the necessary skills to operate this new piece of equipment? These are now qualitative considerations. What is the impact on existing contract, the suppliers or other stakeholders? Are we going to comply with legal requirements? Do we have the capacity? Do we have to make any changes to our business processes? So can you see, I'm now looking beyond the numbers. Operational, what does this decision mean? And as part of my operational assessment, I then also need to assess even my external environment. What is it going to mean? In light of the current political environment, what does this decision mean? In light of my competitive environment, what does this decision mean? Legal, economic. So if I find this for external, Pestel analysis is a very useful tool to be able to identify qualitative factors to consider. Let's say the decision that I'm making here is expanding into another market or country. So if I use my Pestel, I'm saying, okay, what is the political environment in that country? What is the social environment or social landscape, economic landscape, legal landscape? It will give me an idea of things that I will be able to talk about in terms of my qualitative assessment. However, I want to caution you. Here I've just provided this list as guidance. So it does not mean that when you then get a question which asks you to consider, to discuss other factors to consider or to describe other things you need to take into account, you need to write all these things. You then need to go back to your scenario. Am I given any information that may impact on the customers, employees, or on existing contracts? We are now using the information in the case study. Maybe the decision that I'm making has got nothing to do with, will not impact my customers anyway. So it means in my qualitative consideration, I'm not going to discuss anything about customers. Or maybe the decision that I'm making will not have any impact as far as my competition is concerned. So it means in my qualitative considerations, I'm not going to talk about competitors. So this is just giving you a framework to, just as a completeness check, and to give you a starting point in doing your qualitative evaluation. Then again, you also need to look at the strategic considerations. So I've played around with the numbers. The numbers are making sense. But strategical, is it making sense? Where you can look at things such as, is the decision in line with the entity's vision, mission, values, and overall strategic objectives? So let's say, for example, as a business, we are operating a group of hospitals. And then there comes an opportunity to invest in a business that sells alcohol. And you can, from the quantitative analysis, it's clear that you're going to make money. But then you need to go back. Currently, our business is aligned towards healthcare. Now, going to this line of business, Will it still be in line with our strategic objectives and plans? Will it still be in line with our values? Those are now qualitative considerations. Qualitative, from a financing perspective, do you have the financial capacity to take up this opportunity? What impact is it going to have on our capital structure? What impact is it going to have on our dividend policy? Here I'm now looking at other strategic consideration arising. How will the decision impact on the strategic direction of the end date? So I'm sure, just to conclude this discussion, here we just want to emphasize that whenever you're doing your practice questions, I know it's very easy to allocate enough time to play around with the question that requires you to calculate. And when you then come to this question which requires to give the qualitative considerations, we then tend to just to brainstorm, jot down points, but without really getting into the detail of what do I need to consider as part of this decision-making process. What has been triggered in the case study? Are there any inconsistencies? Is there anything that goes against our strategic objectives? Operationally, what does this decision mean? Will we need to change anything? What do management need to consider? So I hope that this session has really been helpful, just to conscientize us on how we are expected to deal with those questions that require us to provide qualitative considerations in decision making. And I believe the moment you master this thinking and thought process, is going to set you up properly to deal with any question in math that requires you to discuss or work on questions that go beyond the quantitative analysis. Thank you very much for taking time to watch this video session. I hope it's going to be very helpful in you attempting future questions on qualitative considerations, and you apply some of the tips and techniques that I was proposing. Thank you once again.